So recently, I was blessed to get to go on a sabbatical and spend some time in research and spend some time with God and in a part of that, we had a lot of experiences and a lot of adventures, my family and I. And one particular adventure we had, we were camping in Antelope Island in the middle of the Great Salt Lake, and we got there and set up our camp, and we were witness to probably the most gorgeous sunset I have ever seen in my entire life. Just watching the sun go down over the lake and all of the mountains, all of the colors that reflected on the mountains and on the water. It was just such a gorgeous scene. And part of the great thing about this campsite was when you got there, it came with, this is what they advertised, it came with a bundle of firewood. So we were excited to kind of, once camp was set up, to kick back by a campfire and enjoy the evening. And we noticed, as we looked around, we noticed that it didn't seem like anybody else that was camping at that campground was building a fire. Well, we didn't think anything of it. We got our fire going, and I started cooking dinner on my Coleman stove, and we were having a good time until we realized why no one else was sitting by a campfire. You could hear them coming. This buzz that just became louder and louder and louder as these little no-see-ums, these little flies, these little brine flies were flying off the lake right towards us. And as they came closer, their buzz became louder, and then they began to coat us all over us on our arms and on our legs, and we could just sort of wipe off the flies. It was disgusting, and it was kind of weird, right? I'm trying to keep them off my dinner, and it became a battle. We had to establish a battle plan of how we were going to eat, and then how we were going to get from here and into our tent without any of those flies getting in there to pester us all night long. And so we sort of became entrenched in kicking those things off of us and working our way towards it. It almost was like a war. We joked about it. And in fact, the next night, we were in our tent well before sunset so that we would not experience that again. I think that, even though it's kind of a silly story, I think that oftentimes life can feel this way for us. That we can hear sometimes even the approach of an oncoming battle. And we can look at all of these battles that we participate in life, whether it's a battle with our sin or an addiction or anything that we're fighting against. And as you sort of count all of these battles we experience, you begin to recognize that we're not in a bunch of individual battles, but actually, spiritually speaking, we're fighting a war. That we're literally fighting against death and sin itself. Well, in the book of Deuteronomy, the author of Deuteronomy sort of lays out at different points, different laws, different ways that he wants the people of Israel to live that's going to make them sort of stand out from the rest of the world. What is going to make them different? And so he lists all of these ways of living out. And then you get towards the end of the book, and he begins to list out how this nation of people would respond in terms of a war. And so this is what he says. This is what you do. This is how you approach war that sets you apart from all the other nations of the world. The author says this to his people: "For the Lord your God is the one who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies to give you victory." Think about that for a moment. Any battle they go into now, they know, because of the promise they have found and that they have heard from God, is that any battle they go into, God goes with them. And that any war they find themselves in, God goes with them. And in that, they find victory. Can you imagine what kind of confidence that would give them, knowing that no matter what battle they found themselves in, they were going to win the war? Now, certainly there were parts of the battles that were hard. There were parts of the battles they didn't like. There were parts of the battles that maybe it even seemed like they might lose. But in the end, the Lord would give them victory. And so I want to ask you, as you approach the war in your life, this war against sin, this war against death, as you approach each of those battles, do you approach with that kind of confidence and that knowledge that the Lord will give you victory? Because this promise doesn't just apply to them in war, but this is the promise we find all throughout Scripture that applies even to our lives. that through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, we have victory. We have victory over death. We have victory over sin. That there will be a day that we shed off this body of death and we experience no more battles, for the war has been won. That's the promise we find in Scripture. May it give you hope in any battles you face today.